Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, I see that you are returning. We're almost there. We're going to be starting right now, okay? Well, first of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for the organization to accept this talk. Today, we're going to talk about attacking and defending SAP systems. We're going to give like a brief introduction to this type of systems from the red teaming and from the blue teaming point of view. We're going to see some of the attacks, we're going to see some countermeasures, and even a little bit of monitoring, what the strategies we can take to actually monitor and understand what is going on. If you don't know, because you have never played with this type of systems, and you might be wondering what SAP is, no biggie, it's just like the main financial system in the world, and we're going to be talking about that. As I said before, this is going to be just a really, really brief introduction. If you wanted to talk about SAP, we could be here like months. SAP is so big and has so many components, cloud interfaces, etc., that we will be here months. But hey, at least you get an overview. So this is a slide that we always put, no one reads, but it's very important. Pretty much it says that we don't want to override any of the rights that SAP has on its own brand. That's it. Okay, so I work for a company that specializes in SAP cybersecurity. And the company has some software, but apart of that, I do a lot of the services, especially the SAP penetration testing. Through that experience is what I'm going to be sharing today of the common pattern attacks, how attackers are normally targeting this type of financial systems, and what are your chances to defend against those attacks. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes, well, you will see in a few. Again, my name is Jordan Santarsieri. I am the founder of the company, and I started, as probably many of you here, as a general penetration tester, like attacking, well, I was specializing at the time on the banking industry. That's why I got pivoted to SAP, but I was attacking pretty much everything, like switches, web application servers, web apps, etc. And at some point, I started to get some interest, as I was already doing some banking stuff. I started to get some traction on SAP, like, hey, why all these little banking interfaces going to this gigantic system? What is going on? So that's how I got my expertise. So I started to check and review and analyze SAP systems back in 2008. And since then, I have worked with many, many big organizations, like a lot of military institutions, the biggest ONG in the planet, and tons of the Fortune 500 companies. We're going to see later on why that SAP is so closely related with these important companies. And today, I had the privilege to speak here for you on my first B-sides, but I'm also an often speaker and training at Black Hat, OWASP, Hacker Halted, Insomni Hat, Code Blue, Echo Party, I Shot the Sheriff, etc. So enough about me. Let's see what we have for today. I have split this presentation in actually 4. We're going to see an introduction to SAP, and we're going to see the financial implications of SAP. It's very important that we spend these times to give the intro, because otherwise you might not understand once we get to the point where we're going to see the attacks on real time. I actually virtualizing an SAP system right now on my machine, a reduced version for obvious reasons. And I have, because I'm crazy and I like to take risks, I have like several live demos that I'm going to be showing to you if time allows. So yes, on chapter 3, we get like fully technical really fast. And finally, we close up with some of the conclusions, okay? And the Q&A, of course. So chapter 1, for those of you that have never seen an SAP system before, you might be wondering, okay, what is SAP? Well, SAP is actually an acronym. It stands for Systems, Applications, and Products in Data Processing. So, of course, no wonder why people just say SAP. It's shorter, it's easier, it's catchy. So I don't know if you knew about the history of SAP, but back in the 72, a little bit earlier, there were a couple of engineers working for IBM. They were working on an ERP for IBM. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning Software. To give you a super oversimplification, an ERP software aims to provide solutions to all the different parts of a company. Logistics, HR, perform payments, goods management, etc. So they were working on this ERP system for IBM, and out of the blue, pun intended, IBM says, you know what, the project gets canceled. And these guys look at each other and say, hey, wait, we do have something good between our hands. There is nothing similar on the market. Why don't we split up and create our own company? Maybe we can develop our own ERP system. And let me tell you, guys, this was one of the most successful business decisions on the history of modern software. Look at these numbers. SAP right now has more than 105,000 employees worldwide, and 2 days ago they even announced that they're going to be overhiring, like surpassing the expectations pretty much in India. They're going to be hiring and hiring more people. They are in 155 countries. If you look, I think in the UN, the number of countries that the UN recognizes right now is around 222. Well, those guys, they are working in 157 countries. They're huge. And most importantly, they say that they have more than 480,000 customers worldwide. And when they do the count, they do like pretty much no matter if the customer has something like really small or if they only have a cloud component, etc. As long as you're paying for something SAP related, you're counted as a customer. So, in types of solutions, how many SAP systems are out there and what are the main differences? I'm going to give you once again, a super oversimplification just to give you an idea of what they are out there and what information holds. Because again, this could be like a gigantic map if we wanted to expand. But for simplicity's sake, I had divided this in 3. Enterprise solutions, supporting solutions, and the new ones, the cloud solutions. Enterprise solutions, for you to understand it very easily, is where people log in to work. Very simple. Where if you need to request for vacations, you log into an enterprise solution. If you are going to be processing what is the payment of the employees, it's going to be an enterprise solution. If you want to do intelligence of the information that you have, enterprise solutions. The vast majority right now in the market, the vast majority of the enterprise solutions are still on-prem, but it's an active effort of SAP to migrate those systems 100% to the cloud. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. I think we're going to live in what is called a hybrid environment. A little bit on-prem, a little bit in the cloud. Think about it. There are a lot of PII information that you cannot just put directly in the cloud. So, if the company that you're working with only has one SAP system, and only one, they will have what is called the SAP ERP or S/4HANA, depending the version that you're dealing with. If the company is processing credit cards, they're going to be there. If the company is paying vendors, the money, the bank accounts, all the reference of the vendors, the TINs, IBANs, everything is going to be on the ERP. Then you have a couple others. The BI is where people utilize to do business intelligence. For example, customer has bought a pair of shoes like 5 years ago. Maybe it's time to keep sending emails offering new shoes. Well, all that information is done in BI. Quarter information, like knowing if company is doing well, like publicly traded company is doing well or not, how they determine that with information on the BI. And CRM, for example, is another example of an enterprise solution, and it's very important, especially here in Europe because of the law. They centralize and correlate every single interaction of the people, of the customers, with the companies. So it's very important to be protected because if we leak personal identifying information that is going to be on the CRM, guess what? Mr. GDPR will come knocking at your door. Then we have supporting solutions. This one's super simple. The supporting solutions, the main goal is to provide support to the enterprise solutions. Here, what you're normally going to be seeing are technical users to log in. You won't see the vast majority of the company logging into this. For example, you have the GRC. I'm pretty sure most of you will know what government risk and compliance it is right now. To give you an example, to make sure that if a user can create a purchase order, that user should not be able to approve that purchase order for obvious reasons, right? Fraud. We have mobile, Cloud Connector, etc. And finally, as I told you before, the newest and the greatest SAP offering, we have the cloud solutions. Here it changes a lot. It changes a lot in terms of the architecture, the protocols that we're going to use, etc. Maybe if you are aware of SAP, you might hear about SAP BTP, Business Technology Platform. That will be the go-to point for SAP in the future. AIG, pretty much it will be an IDP if you want to combine this with single sign-on for some of the solutions. And CPI, that is a really fancy way to call a middleware that is in the cloud. Pretty much it will accept requests from all different SAP systems, and it will centralize it and send it to your on-prem network or to other cloud components. That's like a gross generalization. So very basic components, concepts that you need to know before we can get technical here. The first one is the concept of SAP landscape. A landscape, and you will see it a lot in the documentation, is pretty much a logical division created by SAP. If someone tells you, hey, how your ERP landscape looks like, that person will be asking you to describe the development system, the QA system, and the production system. The minimum expression, and SAP here demands it for the vast majority, is 3: dev, QA, and production. But it's up to the company to decide how many tiers they want to have. To the left side, you might have a sandbox, and it's totally fine. Between QA and production, you might have UAT, and it's totally fine. That is up to you. Of course, the more you add, the more you have to administer, and the more you have to secure. Okay? And each one of the systems is going to be identified with what is called a seed. 3 characters or 3 digits name that we're going to assign to the SAP systems, and that name cannot be repeated across the landscape. So this is how the SAP system looks like, again, an oversimplification for the sake of time, of an SAP, how it looks like, right? And we're going to be talking mainly about the framework. Depending on the documentation and the version that you're dealing with, you might find that that framework is being referred as NetWeaver, or now with the new push that SAP is doing, they are referring as S4 or S4HANA, etc. So the framework is definitely the most important piece of technology that SAP has to offer, because its job is very important. The framework that sits here on the application layer is in charge to regulate how the SAP system is going to operate with the operating system, how it's going to connect and interface, and how the SAP system is going to connect to the database. And we're going to see very soon that there are a lot of trust relationships that we can abuse if we have the right permissions. Now, the framework is service-oriented, and we have 2 types of framework. We have ABAP, is the most important one, and if you need to remember something from it, is that it's where the money is. Here you have the credit cards, the payments, IBANs, etc. The important stuff is the ABAP, and mainly is utilized as a backend. And you also have another one that is Java-based, that SAP is not so slowly deprecating it, but still you might find it in tons and tons and tons of companies. It's mainly used for extranets or to provide some web applications, but again, it's not being used anymore. These NetWeavers, like ABAP and Java, will have its own set of services. Some services are shared, some others are not, and each one of those services will have a specific port. So moving forward, apart of having one system, we have the concept of application servers. Look at this diagram. Look at production. Suppose that at the beginning we created a company, we bought SAP, and we had to provide support for, I don't know, to give you an exaggeration, 10 users. Perfect. When you do the hardware spec, you don't do it for 10, you do it for 20, right? Well, The business goes well, a couple years pass, and you no longer need to support 10 users, now you need to support 1,000. What do? You throw everything away and you start from scratch? No. SAP tells you, hey, why don't you add an additional application server and you do load balancing. So that is pretty much what is an application server. It's another entity that is part of the SAP system. The only caveat is that each one of the instance, each one of the application servers will have an instance number that you define at the installation time. It goes from 00 to 99. So in theory, you might have up to 100 instances out there. Okay? And then there are some other differentiations. Each application server might have its own set of services because you can split it. It's a little bit more complicated, but just remember that each application might have services, and that's it. Something that we're going to be seeing a lot, especially when we try to fix some of the stuff, is the concept of profile parameters. Pretty much a profile parameter dictates how SAP works. It's a configuration in SAP. And you have more than 2,000 profile parameters. It's just one way to configure SAP, and you already have 2,000 ways to do it. Here, it's pretty much everything, from like the path of the logs, the amount of RAM that you want to give to the virtual machines, to, for example, some security related, like minimum passport length, right? Every single one of those configurations can be done through a profile parameter. But there is a caveat, and this is a consequence of dragging technology from the 90s. The kernel that SAP uses is a little bit old, and therefore is monolithic. What does it mean, or what is the real impact? Well, if I want to change the vast majority of the profile parameters, there are a few that are different, but if you want to change 95% of the profile parameters, you need to restart the SAP system for the changes to take effect. And for those of you that don't know much about SAP, you might be wondering, well, it's not a big deal. I have my workstation with Windows, and from time to time it asks me to reboot, or I have my Linux box, and when I need a new kernel, I do need to reboot it. Yeah, fine, but those are consumer things. This thing manages a lot of money, and you can use it to sell stuff, you can use it to pay taxes, to interface with banks. This thing needs to be 24/7. So it's not that you will be able to restart the SAP system whatever you want it. In general, you have windows of opportunities that are very well designed. The ones that they restart more often, they give you one per quarter. And some customers only give you one per year. So when you need to restart a system just to change for a minimum password length, that is a problem. So here on the bottom, you see how is the syntax of a profile parameter is quite simple, like a key value. You get the key, in this case, dir_audit, and you get the value that pretty much is a path where you're going to be storing the logs. Chapter 2, what are the financial implications? We know a little bit, okay, what SAP is. Why is so important in the financial world? Look at this number. 85% of the Fortune 500 companies, for those of you that don't know, Fortune 500 are pretty much the richest companies that are there in the world, the richest and the biggest. And 85% of those use SAP, any product of SAP. In general, most of them, they do have the ERP, but to each their own. And this is a claim that SAP offers, that they say that their customers generate 80% of the total global commerce revenue that is out there. This, of course, is legal activities. Of course, it doesn't have into account illegal activities. I don't know how they were able to reach that number, 87%, but it's what they claim. So what you are finding inside these kind of systems? Everything. And when I say everything, everything. Chances are that if your organization don't have an SCADA, well, the most important system in your organization is going to be an SAP. You have employee salaries that you can easily modify if you hack into it. You have payment to service providers, credit cards, bank accounts. Very important, you have financial performance reports. It happened to me on a pen test that I was like hacking inside the SAP system, gigantic automakers. I was able to get the financial results before they make those financial results public. From an attacker perspective, that is crazy, and it's an opportunity to gain a lot of money. If the company did well, you just go to the stock market and buy shares. If the company did poorly, you just go and short the company. That's why it's so important from the attacker point of view to enter or try to track these kind of systems. And apart of that, and this changes from country to country, this thing is directly connected to banks. This thing allows you to perform business and financial transactions, pay providers right away. It's not like SWIFT that you have like a pre-control, etc. No, here it just goes. And depending on the country, this thing also needs to be connected 24/7 to tax agencies. Every time that you sell something, you need to declare on real time the sale to the different tax agencies. Again, this depends on each one of the countries. This, and in combination with like the security organizations claiming that there are a lot of attacks, a lot of cyber attacks, and there are a lot of money that is being lost to SAP, you might be wondering, okay, so why someone will attack my SAP system? It runs business critical applications, stores very, very sensitive information. The organizations highly depend on it. And in simple words, it's where the money is. If the attack is financially motivated and the company has an SAP system, well, it's a no-brainer. And because of that, and here I want to do a disclaimer, especially for those of you that are pen testers or do consulting, it's very important to translate the vulnerabilities. What do I mean? If you go to an organization and you ask, okay, who owns the workstations? Who owns the switches? Who owns, I don't know, the VoIP phones? They will tell, well, that would be the IT director. Well, if you ask who owns the SAP system, and again, this depends on the organizations, it will not be the IT director. It will be the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer. So if you go with a vulnerability and say, hey, you know what, I was able to get an RCE, and because this RCE and a payload that I have, and the shell code, I was able to get a shell, and with that shell get into the system, that person will look at you and what you're speaking Japanese or what. But if you say, hey, you know what, I was able to, without credentials, get inside your SAP system, inside the database, and because of that, I now have access to the credit cards, that message changes a lot. It immediately gets understood that there is a problem and that the organization needs to go a little bit further to actually mitigate and fix that problem. It's very important that you articulate the message correctly, and it's very important that you understand the business a little bit more when you present the results. Otherwise, no one will understand you and things will still left unpatched and broken. So everything that we're going to see here, we're going to divide in three, like espionage, sabotage, and fraud. Espionage, to be simple and to give you some examples, it's like, think what information of one company could be valuable for another. Like, especially if you need to create like manufacturing stuff, formulas, etc. Sabotage. These things, SAP is very often also connected to the line of production. And if the SAP system goes down, you lose the tracking, and you might need to throw away some of the production. It happened to us when we were working with a customer that pretty much manufactured yogurts. In order for them to be able to guarantee that the validity of the yogurts that are not spoiled, they needed to be running with SAP 24/7. If not, they need to throw away the entire production. And finally, fraud, the most common one. I have seen it all here, like people creating 2 employees, getting 2 salaries, etc. It's very common. It's the most common type of attack that you see in SAP. Okay, so you got the introduction, you survived the introduction, very well. Now we're going to start getting technical. Now we're going to start seeing some of the attacks. Particularly, we're going to focus on one component. Again, it's impossible to show you everything in just 45 minutes. But we're going to use one of the most common attacks components in SAP, and one component that was created and is still extremely relevant today. It was created in 1992. Very old, still very used. So we're going to be talking about the SAP Gateway. The gateway is a component that is in ABAP and Java, and as many things in SAP, it will handle a proprietary protocol. It's called SAP RFC. It's actually a multi-level protocol. There is not much documentation about this, only if you have like really good reverse engineer skills, or if you are an SAP employee, more or less you know how it works. There are a few wrappers that makes your life easier, even though now SAP is deprecating those. But still, only if you do reverse engineer, more or less you know how this thing works. What is the main goal of this gateway? Pretty much share messages. You can share it from one SAP system to another, or an SAP system and external interfaces. By default, the gateway, as I told you before, it will run in its own service, its own port. It's 33XX. What do I mean with XX? Remember the instance number, that each one of the instances will have a number, right? Well, here is the same. If I want to reach the gateway on instance 00, I hit the port 3300, and if I want to hit the instance 01, I hit the port 3301. Normally, you will not expect to see the gateway exposed to the internet, but again, I have seen it all. Showdowns, UI, you still find them very, very easily. So the gateway might or might not require credentials, because it's a free country. You do what you want. Yes, it's very permissive. And on top of that, and with many, many things in SAP, by default, the communication is unencrypted. And it's not easy at all to encrypt that communication. It's not as like I put a certificate there and everyone is happy, we can go home. Oh no, it's a mini project. In the newest versions of SAP, they do offer encryption by default, but again, it's self-signed. You need to redo the whole process, so it's a little bit tricky. So what happens if the SAP gateway is unprotected, as it is in many versions by default? Well, a remote and unauthenticated attacker, just by having network connectivity, will be able to start or register programs. They're called RFC external programs. Those programs some programs come pre-registered in SAP, but you can upload your own. That is up to you. One of those programs, and the program that we are going to exploit, and a program that SAP uses a lot, and when I say a lot, it's like a lot, is called SAP XPG. This SAP XPG will allow the SAP system to execute tasks, operating system commands at the operating system level. And it's going to do that with with a user that is called CDADM. The CDADM is the SAP's operating system administrator. So if you gain access to this, if you are able to exploit the gateway, you already have access to all the resources on the file system that belongs to the SAP system. And it's exactly what we're going to do. Yeah. If the codes of the live demo allow us. So pretty much, I have prepared an exploit. I'm not going to give you the details of this one, because you can easily create a worm, and SAP is going to kill me. But you will see how easy it is to actually get common execution. Here you will see that IP that I'm hitting, it says localhost, is because I'm doing some magic with the NATing, as everything is cramped on my PC, but it's a live SAP system that I have brought for you. You just need to hit the port and pass the command, just like that, directly. If the gateway is unprotected, boom, you get directly common execution. And it's not just like it's, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can do an ID to see the privileges that you have. You can do like this. Pretty much you can do everything that the CDADM user can. You can shut down the SAP system right here. You can delete the kernel, perform a denegation of service, everything remotely. You just need network connectivity. So, before we move forward, how do we fix stuff? Okay, if you're lucky enough and you don't need external interfaces to speak with your gateway, you're in luck. It's just a profile parameter. Very simple. You just switch the gateway ACL mode, this profile parameter, to 1, and you restart the SAP system. Otherwise, the changes will not take effect. And once you do that, only the application servers will be able to connect to the gateway. If you cannot have that because you have a legacy interface that you need to deal with, well, welcome to the magical world of the ACL files. As a lot of things in SAP is an access control list where you will need to define like what user, from what IP, to what SAP host, and to what program. Putting the ACL together itself is relatively straightforward. It's not complicated. Having the information to put the ACL in place, like understanding what is passing through your gateway, is different. You might be thinking, well, Jordan, from the blue teamer point of view, the common execution was really straightforward. So it should be really simple to detect these kind of things. Well, yes and no. Unfortunately, especially on the ABAP stack, most of the audit trails, most of the security audit trails do not come enabled. So you need to go one by one. Remember all those services that I was telling you before? You need to go one by one to each one of those services and activate the audit trail. And once you have that audit trail, you can do it with this profile parameter, then yes, the logs are going to be processed. There are not two logs in SAP that they are similar. Here they went wild. Every single service will have its own syntax, its own logs. Some of them will be really easy to parse, as you see here, the gateway. Some others, as the main audit trail, no, they're not even plain text. Some are binary. So good luck ingesting that in Splunk. So at this point, what do we have? We have operating system commands. But we want to do more. Well, remember back then that I was telling you that there is a trust relationship. Always, the application servers will maintain a trust relationship with the database. What does it mean? It means that if I have access to this CDADM, I will be able to execute arbitrary queries as the user that is running the SAP system without providing any passwords, just the command, and we're going to see it. For this example, the system that I have here for you today is running an Oracle database. So we're going to see that we're going to be using the SQL Plus client. I'm pretty sure many of you, if you have worked with Oracle in the past, you have dealt with the SQL Plus. You can go right now to oracle.com and download a copy. There is no magic here. It's just a regular client. There is a problem here. The way that we are using to execute queries is exactly the same thing that SAP uses for the normal operatory. So it is extremely, and when I say extremely, it's like extremely difficult as a forensic investigator or as a SOC person to identify or to make the differentiation between a real attack and a normal execution. Unless the attacker is a script kiddie and went wild, truncating or deleting a lot of stuff, it's very unlikely that you will be able to tell apart normal operation versus these kind of things, versus an attack. So what we can find in the database, 95% of the stuff that SAP handles is in the database. So credit cards, salaries, bonus, vacations, purchase orders, we will be able to modify them all if you have database access. We also have password hashes. And we're going to see some examples. And I'm going to be describing for you the command so you guys can see it. Pretty much we're doing the same that we do last time. We tag the host, we tag the gateway on the given port, and look at this. We invoke the SQL Plus binary, not one that you have here in your local machine, if not the one that is on the SAP system. And we say, hey, I want to elevate our privileges. We want to use this trust relationship. So whatever we're going to execute, please do us a favor and execute it as sysdba. And then you pass the query. The query you previously create. You do an echo, select all from you leave it on the SAP system, and then you execute it. Once you have that, that's it. It goes directly to the database without asking you credentials. Because, again, you are abusing the trust relationship that SAP already is maintaining with the database. So you have all the users, and you have two hashes. We're going to be talking why there are two hashes. So we have now access to the operating system. We have now access to the database. We want to get to the application, right? We want a user in the application. So what do? Well, someone that is not very skillful or couldn't care less about the system, as we can execute queries, we do an insert into and create a new user for us. That is not neat, and that is definitely not for a good professional. What we're going to do, as we have access to the hashes, we're going to use those hashes and we're going to crack them so we can log into the SAP system. Here comes the funny part. Depending on the version of your SAP system, you might have up to 3 different hashes for the same user and using up to 4 algorithms. It's a little bit complex. Long story short, is for downwards compatibility. Older SAP systems, they only know how to create older hashes. Newer SAP systems will be able to create and support all of them. The first one and the most vulnerable is called B code. And hear this. It's MD5 based. MD5. It's up to 8 characters long. No matter if you put like a gigantic hash, whatever you put there, SAP is going to truncate it in 8. Case insensitive. Some of you, if you have experience with cracking, you're already enjoying this. It's non-Unicode, and it does have a salt. Good, at least the hash is salt. But the hash is using the salt, the username. So yeah, you cannot do a rainbow table for pretty much everyone, but you can target whatever user you want. Then you have a newer one, passcode. It's SHA-1 based. So at least now your passwords can be up to 8 characters long. They're case sensitive. Now we are duplicating the char set. Very good. And it's even Unicode. So from the cracking point of view, it will take many, many more hints in order to actually crack the passwords. They share a fallacy with the B code. They do use a salt, but the salt is the username. Still not the best. And then we have the newest ones that are called PW salted hash, where we have 2 possibilities. We can do a salted SHA-1 with 1024 iterations. How does it work? You get the password, you hash it once, and then you apply 1,023 more hashings. You do that to make the hash more expensive. The more expensive it is to generate, the longer it will take for an attacker to crack it. And then you have the newest, the greatest algorithm that only the newest SAP system can support, that is a salted SSHA, but this time 522 bits. The other one was 128. 15,000 iterations. You hash, 15,000 the same passwords, and a salt size that is really big. These ones take a day, years and years to crack. So what do we do here? Well, we're going to take the advantage here as we saw some of the hashes. I'm going to be showing to you that we're going to use John the Ripper, this open source tool, to actually crack the hashes. But there is a caveat. The format is a little bit particular. Look at this. Is the username, .. the salt, but remember, the salt was the username, and from the .. here comes the different part. From the .. to the $ symbol that is obligatory, it has to be 40 spaces. If you don't do 40 spaces exactly, John the Ripper will not recognize the hash. So once you have that, you pretty much go to John, run, you invoke John the Ripper. For most of the hashes, John is smart enough. It will recognize that there are hashes from SAP. You choose pass the hash. As we are targeting B code, you saw that it's just like that. The password is up to 8 characters long, so it's really easy to crack. The higher you go in terms of the hash, well, it takes more and more, obviously. So pretty much, you have the user Jordan with the password supersec. So you go to the SAP GUI, you connect, so you do Jordan, and that's it. As the password was valid, and this is my first logon, SAP is saying, hey, okay, it worked. Would you like to change your initial password? So good. Once again, what can we do to actually make things better? Well, if you're lucky enough that in your organization or your customer is running like the newest versions of SAP system, Good. What you can do is to disable downwards compatibility. You just change the profile parameter and put it to 0. And you can always force that SAP to use the latest and greatest hash algorithm. And on top of that, because all the old hashes will remain, you need to run a specific program in order to clean up the vulnerable hashes. If you are not lucky enough and you need to support older SAP systems, you are stuck with it. There is nothing you can do to actually migrate to the newest hashes, simply because the older SAP system will not understand the new hashing. And that's it. You are stuck forever until you can actually migrate those SAP systems. So we got operating system commands, we got access to the database, we're able to crack the hash, we got the application level access. What else we can do? Well, the most important security mechanism that SAP has for both ABAP and Java is called secure storage. We're going to see only the one for ABAP because it's the most important. Pretty much, the secure storage is a file system container that is encrypted. Nothing out of the ordinary. And what we can find there? Oof, a lot of stuff. Usernames, hosts, port, passwords for the database, pins for containers that will contain public and private keys for certificates or for whatever you are using, encryption keys for what is called destinations, from moving from one system to another, master passwords, the passwords of the most powerful users. A lot of very important secrets are stored here. By default, this file system container, you will find one or two files. The first one, the one that you will find always, it ends in .dat. Pretty much, as I said before, it's a file that is encrypted in triple des. And it's not like generic triple des. SAP always likes to have something generic, modify it, and release it. There is always a twist with the encryption. And also, you might or might not have a dot key. If you don't have a dot key, which is by default, you are encrypted with a default and hard-coded key. Pretty much everyone in the world has that key. If you are lucky enough that your administrator installed it correctly, you will find a custom encryption key that will be on this dot key file. I don't have a lot of time to explain how does it work, so I'm going to resume it a lot. Pretty much at the beginning, at the left side, you have the file that is completely encrypted, and SAP does a first row of decryption. And it partially decrypts a part of the structure. Then it uses the information that was partially decrypted to generate another key and to do yet another row to decrypt the whole thing. And I'm going to show you. First, I'm going to show you the program that I have created for you. This is just a Python script. As you can see, it's triple des. I'm using PyDes. And if you go up, you have some hard-coded keys out there that you might not use in case you want to open it yourself. Pretty much that's it. If you know a little bit of reverse engineering and you are able to, for example, debug an operator, you will be able to see and you will be able to get the information. And first, I want to show you here that the files, it's not that they're empty, they're completely encrypted. They're encrypted, you don't see the password, you just see random strings that SAP uses as eye catchers. And then the custom encryption key. So we take this, we have the algorithm, we know how to decrypt it, boom. Look at this. You have the full connection to the database, the port, you have the seed, the name of the database, the user, and the password immediately. If there were more secrets, you will also get them. For this example, it was just the database connection. Okay, so what we can do here, pretty much we run a program that is the sexstore to secure the secure storage. We have to enforce a custom encryption key, and if you have a secure storage that is vulnerable, you have to encrypt it with the new key. So we have full access to pretty much everything, but what is missing? Well, a backdoor. Pretty much, as an attacker, you want to create something that will allow you to connect back and actually, without effort, jump right into the SAP system. What we're going to do? Remember that we saw that there were a lot of hashes for a user. That is weird. What a user should have so many hashes? Well, it's because of this downwards compatibility. As we are not sure, as an SAP, we're not sure to what system we're going to be talking to, SAP has to generate all of them. And depending to how it is configured, you might say only accept the new ones, or only accept the old ones, or accept everything. Well, as an attacker, we're going to configure it in 4, and we're going to force it to accept everything. This is how it will look like regularly if you create a user, Jordan, with a super secure .124 password, SAP will generate it. But as the V code is only 8 characters long, it's going to truncate it. As an attacker, the only thing that you do an update to one of the files, to the V code row, and that's it. You as an attacker, you will be able to log in with Jordan and password evil pass, and the veridic user, Jordan, will be able to connect with super secure 124. And this, I'm closing up, is one of my main beef with the new regulations of NIST, where they tell you that you should only rotate passwords if you suspect that the passwords were compromised. I wish you the best of luck trying to determine that someone is backdooring your SAP system like this. So if you follow that NIST recommendation, this thing will stay there forever until the user decides that he or she wants to change the password. So we need to be very, very mindful of these kind of recommendations. So to close up, again, SAP is super complex. It's a quite complex discipline. It's very hard to talk about it in only 45 minutes. For the red teamers, there are a lot of entry points. Here we just saw one. There are thousands and thousands of entry points that you can exploit. And for the blue teamers, your hope is to try to prevent an attacker to set foot on the system. If an attacker gets one foot there, it's extremely, extremely difficult to detect and to stop that. Prevent, prevent, prevent. Implement the patches is extremely important. All the LCLs, activate the audit trails, and do audits and pen tests regularly. It's your only hope. Thank you so much for your time and your patience. Now, if you have questions, please let me know.